Dave Palumbo here with a species supplement science update. Today's topic is metformin. It is a drug that has been around for a very long time. There was a new study that came out. I'm going to reference that in a minute, but I want to just give you guys an idea of what metformin is used for. First, it's used for people who are pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetics. So that means people whose blood sugar control is not good, meaning that their blood sugars creep up. They take their blood sugar in the morning first thing, also known as fasting blood glucose levels. Maybe they're running high for some reason. They might be over 90, over 100, or even higher than that. And these are people who would be considered, diabetic type individuals. Now, a lot of bodybuilders run high fasting blood sugars in the morning because they're taking growth hormone, or they're just eating an enormous amount of food and their pancreas can't keep up. What happens overnight, and we've talked about this before, it's known as the dawn phenomenon, is that before you wake up, the liver cranks out an enormous amount of glucose. It turns amino acids essentially into glucose, a process known as gluconeogenesis. And just before you wake up, it releases all this sugar into the blood. Now, the pancreas' job is to release insulin to absorb that, and a lot of times it can't do that because it's lacking the ability to produce enough, or the receptors are not receptive enough, and you have something called insulin resistance. So a lot of times the first line of defense that these doctors like to prescribe is glucophage or metformin, same drug. And what it does in humans, more so than in animal models, it can actually increase insulin sensitivity so the insulin receptors work better. But in humans, its main focus and main job is to reduce the output of glucose from the liver. So it basically stops the liver from engaging in gluconeogenesis. Not completely, but it blunts that effect, so it keeps blood sugars from rising as much, especially in the morning when we have this dawn phenomenon. Sounds like a good thing, right? I mean, it sounds like an easy fix, but the problem is if the pancreas is overwhelmed and it can't produce enough insulin, it's not taking the burden off the pancreas in any significant way, especially if you're eating a lot of food, like bodybuilders do. So that's why I'm usually more so inclined to recommend insulin. But another thing that always disturbed me is that they always wondered why metformin was a drug that a lot of people noticed helped alleviate cancer. So the people who have cancer, they would be put on metformin for blood sugar issues, and all of a sudden the cancer would go away. And they didn't really know why that happened. And one of the reasons they figured out was that it decreases the output of IGF-1, or insulin-like growth factor 1, which we know is one of the most anabolic hormones in the body. It's what's responsible for taking stem cells, or the satellite cells, same name, these cells that surround the muscle tissue, and turning them into new muscle fibers. So we don't want to blunt the IGF-1 response if we're a bodybuilder. It's good if you have cancer in your body, because IGF-1 is what will allow the cancer cells to divide more frequently. So it's a good thing for anti-aging, obviously, and it's a good thing for anti-cancer, not good for building muscle. So I always kind of steered people away from the use of metformin and glucophage for that very reason. Now, a new study came out where they used metformin on older people, like people 65 and over, who were in a state of chronic inflammation. As you get older, you kind of have a more inflamed state, and they realized that glucophage or metformin also has an anti-inflammation effect in the muscle, by increasing the recruitment of what we call these macrophages. Macrophages are immune cells that eat up and reduce inflammation. So they postulated, these people who did the study, that if they could reduce inflammation in the muscle, that they might create a more anabolic muscle for these older people who have chronic inflammation. Well, what they found was the exact opposite. They found that by reducing the inflammation in the muscle, which it did do, it reduced these macrophages, they actually found that they didn't put on as much muscle, that it blunted the muscle response. And the way they figured this out is they did a control group that got nothing, a placebo pill, and then one group that got the actual metformin. The group that got nothing actually put on muscle from resistance training. And remember, they subjected these older individuals to progressive resistance training, which is basically weight training. And so the people who used metformin didn't gain as much muscle mass as the ones who did. So what they realized was this anti-inflammatory effect within the muscle actually inhibited mTOR. Now, if you guys know what mTOR is, mTOR, I'm sure you've heard of it. To make things real easy, if you imagine a factory, mTOR is the switch. When you flip mTOR on, it's like turning on the protein machinery switch of the factory, so the factory can start producing new muscle tissue. If mTOR is not turned on, you're not going to start you're not going to start building muscle following an exercise bout. So progressive resistance training stimulates, the body's ability to want to engage in repairing the muscle. Metformin seems to blunt this effect by reducing the amount of mTOR that is turned on, by reducing inflammation in the muscle. Now, we all kind of knew this intuitively, at least I did. If you take anti-inflammatories like, ibuprofen, not Tylenol, which is not an anti-inflammatory. Tylenol is just a painkiller. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, ibuprofen, stuff like that, Advil, they will blunt the muscle building response because the inflammatory reaction that occurs post-workout is kind of the stimulus to turn on mTOR and to turn on the protein machinery. So here's yet another reason why you really don't want to use metformin, if you're a bodybuilder, even though your blood sugars may be running high, metformin inhibits IGF-1 release, and it also reduces inflammation inside the muscle, which reduces mTOR, which will reduce ultimately the production of new muscle tissue. So we don't want to use metformin if we are bodybuilding. Now, for anti-aging purposes, for anti-cancer purposes, might not be a bad thing to do, but most of us who are watching this video are looking for, hey, how can I build muscle the best? If you're running high blood sugars because your pancreas can't keep up with what's going on, you have to take insulin, Now, if your blood sugars are running normal during the day, in other words, you're 2 hours after you eat a meal, you take your blood sugar and they're under 130, then you don't have a problem. You don't need a short-acting insulin. However, if they're high, over 130, you might need a fast-acting insulin like a Humalog, Humulin R with your meals. But if those are normal, which I normally see are normal, what I usually see that's high is elevated is the fasting blood sugars. That's in the morning, first thing when you wake up. I'm seeing blood sugars over 100 in some people. That's too high. If that's too high, that means that while you're sleeping, that dawn phenomenon is not allowing, and that production of glucose that's being engaged in by the liver, gluconeogenesis, is your pancreas is not able to respond. The best way to treat that is with a long-acting insulin like Lantus or Tresiba. If you're using Lantus, it's 2 shots a day. It's like a shot before bed and a shot in the morning. And what that'll do is it'll take the burden off your pancreas to have to produce all that insulin. So you take 15 units a night, say, just for instance, you might have to take more than that. You start off with that 10 units in the morning. You don't have to worry about what you're eating with a long-acting insulin because it doesn't drop your blood sugar quickly. It's a long-term type of situation. And then you see what your blood sugars run. And you keep increasing it little by little until you get that sweet spot where you find how much insulin, long-acting insulin you need to take. And the great thing is that it has nothing to do with your fast-acting, response to food. So you'll still eat a meal and your body will naturally produce its own insulin, in response to the rising blood sugars from your normal meal. You're just helping replace the long-acting phase of insulin release, and that's going to help fix your fasting blood sugars. It's also going to help you grow better because you're going to be absorbing all the food you're eating now, and you're not going to be running high blood sugars. And the reason why high blood sugars are bad is because they accumulate in the tissues of the extremities, the fingers and toes, the eyes, the retina, and they ultimately destroy these tissues. That's why people need amputations, they lose their vision, and if it happens in the kidney tubules, your kidney function will decrease as well. So we don't want high blood sugars, but metformin is not the solution. The reason why doctors like to prescribe it is because it's a pill, and it's easy, and it's cheap. So they give that to people because people are lazy. Or these doctors just don't know. You have to educate yourself. You cannot allow yourself to just listen to what doctors say blindly if you want to function obviously at your best as a bodybuilder, but you also want to be your healthiest. So metformin, not a good solution for bodybuilders. I don't think it's a good solution, period, unless, like I said, unless you have cancer or something like that and you're combating that. This study seems to confirm it, at least in older people. I suspect we'll see a very similar outcome if we were to conduct this experiment on younger people as well. Reducing inflammation post-workout definitely decreases the signal and the mTOR stimulation, which ultimately will result in less muscle building. Okay, guys, I'm Dave Palumbo here, educating you as normal. If you have any ideas for new topics, put them in the comments below. Make sure you hit subscribe, like this video, turn on your notifications, and we'll be back with another Species Nutrition Supplement Spotlight.